For the final note, now that students learning arm weight technique, I usually have them take off both hands' arm weights off. Of course, sometimes your left hand is a melody and right hand is accompaniment. In that case, you're going to have to do the opposite of it, and that's going to be another challenge. And when your music gets more and more advanced, then you're going to have melody and accompaniment at the same time in one hand. So you're going to have to voice it within one hand. And that's going to be another day's topic. But I hope this video is going to help you start thinking about voicing, practicing how to do the voicing. And if you learned something from this video, as usual, please hit the like button so YouTube will know I'm putting out good content. I'm planning to put out more tutorial videos in the future, so if you haven't subscribed and hit the bell button, please do so that you won't miss my next videos. If you have any comments or questions, please leave them in the comment. I always enjoy reading everybody's comments and answering the questions. Alright, that's going to be it for today. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video. Bye-bye. Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Akira. I'm a pianist, piano teacher, and a translator who's lived in 3 different countries. On my YouTube channel, I'm posting my performances as well as videos about music and not about music, whatever I find interesting. So please subscribe and hit the bell button next to it so you'll get notification whenever I put out next video. Today I'm going to talk about voicing. Voicing in piano refers to playing certain part.
I think you've seen a scam before, but wait until you see this one. So just last week, a 22-year-old Bitcoin millionaire called Eric Finman announced to the world the Freedom Phone, a fully private smartphone, completely free of censorship and snooping by the big tech companies like Facebook and Twitter, and at the same time, one that is supposedly comparable to the best smartphones on the market. This thing flew. It almost immediately hit the trending page, and in terms of likes, shares, conversation, people were passionately excited about it, including some pretty well-known influencers who basically were telling people to drop what they're doing and to buy this right now. So I did, quite literally, and paid $500 for a Freedom Phone. And thanks to Dashlane for sponsoring this video. So, this has got to be some next-level smartphone, right? After all, the last Freedom Phone we saw was... Oh, right, yeah. Anyways, just to give you a bit of context, Eric's reason for creating this phone was apparently inspired by the Jan 6th riots in the US. You might remember it. Donald Trump lost the election, and so a lot of his supporters stormed the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. to try and overturn that result. Now, what made this whole thing even more controversial was that a lot of this rioting had been coordinated on a free speech app called Parler. And so after all this happened, Google and Apple removed this app from their stores to discourage more people from joining in. This was the pivot point. Eric's whole message is that this was an unacceptable form of censorship, and that people should be able to say the things they want to say and use the apps they want to use. So he's created a phone that allows them to do that. Okay, I mean, I can also see the other side of that coin, but yeah, just putting the political premise aside, freedom itself is a fairly easy philosophy to get behind. So let's see what we're working with here. If you were an uninitiated consumer who didn't really know much about phones, but saw the inspirational Twitter video and decided you want to buy, are you actually getting more freedom? Well, sort of. Maybe. The entire pitch here rests on this supposed new operating system that he's built, aptly named Freedom OS. It's basically Android, but with a lot of the snooping apps like Google Chrome taken out and replaced with non-snooping alternatives like DuckDuckGo. Misleading that he's pitching it like it's some revolutionary software he's built from scratch, but we'll let that slide. And just to give the guy a little bit of credit, he's not wrong in that there are certain apps that Google has censored, that this phone's app store called Patriot will allow you to download. And the kind of finishing message that he's leaving people with is that Freedom Phone does everything your current phone does, except censor and spy on you. This is where things start to go wrong. I mean, just to begin with, we can't verify that statement because we've got no idea what it does. There's not a single spec on the website. You don't know what processor you're getting, what cameras, what battery, and instead under each feature category, it's just a buy it now button. Like, even if this is made for people who may not care about the specs, for $500, they should at least be able to know what they're paying for. All we have is this little quote that says, best phone in the world. But who said that? Is this guy quoting himself? Also, isn't it just a little ironic, given the whole anti-big tech stance, that this product was announced via a tweet, and then the buy page actively encourages you to sign up to and share using these big tech platforms? But okay, just putting all that aside for a second, the concept of Freedom OS is fine. It's just, from everything we can see so far, it looks almost identical to an already existing free piece of software called Lineage OS. That would be a best-case scenario. See, this Finman guy's had a pretty interesting story. He basically made a deal with his parents that if he could turn $1,000 into $1 million via investments, they would let him skip college. And he did. He put all of that $1,000 he had into Bitcoin, back when Bitcoin was worth nothing, and when that blew up, his $1,000 ballooned into well over $2 million. That's all well and good. Congratulations to him. But the point is, it doesn't in any way qualify him to be responsible for all of your data. It might be a little more reputable than one or two CEOs I know. But seriously, if this guy actually has built his own operating system like he's claiming, then that is a whole other security risk in of itself. Let alone the fact that, can you really rely on Eric Finman to provide you with the regular security updates your phone needs to protect itself? And if you're not getting those updates, then having a completely unfiltered app store, where nothing is censored, even if it's malware, could create more problems than it solves. This is probably the reason for articles like this, bit harsh, but the point stands that nothing this guy has done so far in his career demonstrates that he is in any way an authority on security. Let alone the fact that who knows what kind of support you're going to get here. There's no contact number for the company, and the only email address doesn't answer, or at least has left me on red for 3 days straight. Besides, this whole idea of giving people the option to use apps that have been banned is not a selling point. If I wanted to download Parler on my Android phone, even though I can't find it on the Google Play Store, all I need to do is to rock up to the Parler website and just get it from there, for free. And even this Patri App Store itself, we can see from these celebrity endorsement videos what the interface looks like. And that's enough to all but confirm that all this store is a rebadged version of an already existing free app. And if you are enjoying this video, then a sub to the channel would be invaluable. Didn't see that one coming, did you? Oh yeah, and let's talk about these celebrity endorsement videos actually. Because as soon as this phone was announced, we saw a whole load of high-profile people drop videos that basically said, this is the best thing since sliced bread. We had Candace Owens, who's an American author, who said,
Freedom phone. Literally, I'm holding a phone that is not controlled by Apple Google. I think this is like the most amazing thing ever.
yes, Candace. So am I.
You need to get this phone.
I don't know, Candace. Need is a pretty strong word. I need food. I need water. I probably don't need an unknown spec $500 notched rip-off phone. And clearly neither do you. This girl spent a good minute talking about how easy it is to switch her SIM over and how it's the first thing she did from her iPhone, and yet her tweets after this video are still coming from an iPhone. Oh yeah, and how could I forget?
You can get 10% off by using just my first name, Candace. If you use the code Candace, if you use the code Candace at checkout.
There are plenty more of these endorsement videos, but probably the funniest one is from a girl called Anna Kate. It's literally 30 minutes of pure gold. I kind of wish I could show you the whole thing, but I'll settle for highlights. For starters, she has no idea what it is.
It's an Android? I don't think it's an Android. Is it an Android? I'm not really sure.
Well said.
There is no face recognition, which I love.
What's next? It doesn't make calls, which I love. Face recognition is a useful feature. If you don't like it, you can always turn it off.
So I like that it very much reminds me of an Apple phone.
Пишите код
явно ускоряет процесс написания кода. С помощью искусственного интеллекта Tabney.
It's an Android. Oh, yeah, and don't forget...
If you want to get it, use code KATE. You'll get 10% off.
It doesn't take long to figure out why these people are involved. Turns out the Freedom Phone company has set up an affiliate scheme that pays promoters $50 per sale, which means that, let's say I made a video telling you to drop what you're doing right now and buy it, and let's say 20,000 of you actually went through and placed an order, that would be $1 million. But this is the worst bit. So far, all we've gathered is that all the phone's main selling points aren't really selling points, but this is where it goes from bad product to scam. See, this is an America First phone, right? This thing's entire angle is that your data is yours, get away from spyware, etc. Even the logo is based on the US flag, except it's actually built by a small phone company in China. The one country that Donald Trump, who's almost like the supposed inspiration for this phone, accused of spying. The guy even went as far as to completely ban Chinese Huawei for this exact reason. Finman's justification was that, well, it's impossible to build a phone top to bottom in the US right now, citing the fact that Motorola struggled with this exact same thing. Hey, maybe that would be an issue if, you actually built this phone yourself. But it gets worse. In an interview with Daily Beast, he let loose that the company he was working with was in fact Digital. No, they're shocked.
Космонавт, я понял, да. Переделаем, перевели, да, ладно. Думаешь, они проходят, нет? Вот это хорошо, это круто. Значит, мы свободны, все люди, да. Да. Не выходит так, понимаешь? Да.
Shockingly low cost, and hey, maybe that would be an issue if, you actually built this phone yourself. But it gets worse. In an interview with Daily Beast, he let loose that the company he was working with was in fact QIWI-Digi, known for their shockingly low cost and absolutely not their reputation for security. Oh, and would you look at that? QIWI-Digi already has a phone that looks exactly like yours, the A9 Pro. The notch is the same, the buttons are the same, the camera layout exactly the same. But these are not two different phones. So what you actually mean when you say you worked with QIWI-Digi is these are Pro. That QIWI-Digi already has a phone that looks exactly like yours, the A9 Pro. The notch is the same, the buttons are the same, the camera layout exactly the same. But these are not two different phones. So what you actually mean when you say you worked with QIWI-Digi is that you went onto Alibaba and you ordered 1,000 phones for $100 each. I mean, by this logic, Tim Cook and I are best friends because I've been ordering his iPhones for the last 5 years. Just to give you some perspective here, while a company like Samsung might make 20% profit per phone, Xiaomi might make 10% or maybe even 5%, this guy is out here trying to make a 500 perspective here. While a company like Samsung might make 20% profit per phone, Xiaomi might make 10% or maybe even 5%, this guy is out here trying to make a 500% markup by only adding features that you can already get for free. Finman has tried to justify this $500 price tag by saying the phone features customized hardware and improved memory, but we know what that really means. He's gone to the store, clicked this button, and then clicked this button. But what makes it even funnier is the fact that the QIWI-Digi A9 Pro is not even one of the company's current models. It's a phone from 2020, and the chipset inside of it, the MediaTek Helio P60, has been known to be vulnerable to authentication bypass attacks. This isn't the product of someone who actually cares about privacy, it's the product of someone who's trying to take advantage of people who aren't as tech savvy, and who just don't realize that A, the hardware inside is incredibly cheap, and B, that they can get all of these apps that are on here for free anyways. It's tricking people into thinking they're buying a US-centric device, when actually they might as well have just imported a phone from China and used all the extra money to feed their family for a month. On the subject of dodgy online happenings, this is Dashlane, an app whose entire goal is to make the internet easier. So you've probably been told at some point that the internet is a dangerous place, that you're constantly at risk of being hacked, and that you should make each of your account passwords not just different, but also complex enough that they end up looking like this. But who's going to remember them? That's what Dashlane's for. You can either use your fingerprint or your Face ID, and Dashlane will then be able to instantly autofill all your details onto any site. And compared to using something like Google Chrome's default autofill software, one, it's faster, because it works no matter which device you're using. I could be autofilling on Google Chrome on my Mac, but then pick up my iPhone, open Safari, and still have the same details ready to go. And two, it's safer, because instead of just remembering a password that you typed in, Dashlane can auto-generate the best passwords for you. So you can have every single one of your accounts completely locked down, but at the same time, the only thing you'll ever need to access them is you. If that sounds helpful, then you can actually try Dashlane for free on your first device by just going to dashlane.com/boss. Then if you go through that link and then decide that you want to upgrade for premium, you can get that for 50% off using the code BOSS. To see the biggest nightmare tech fails, click here, or to see what I want Apple to change on the next iPhone, click here. My name is Aaron, this is Mr. Boss. Okay, this is the Vivo X60 Pro Plus.
Смотри, я плохо питаюсь, как бы, без белка, вот там и так далее. Просто, да, это я как бы, ну да, понимаю. То есть ничего особенного, это как бы... Ну, если это можно так назвать, то можно так. Ну ладно.
And it's the most camera that I think a phone has ever been. This is a sponsored video, so it's not a review, but it just does a lot of interesting things. So, these are my top 10. Side note, it's almost sad that I have to say this, but in 2021, it is a feature for a flagship phone to come with everything in the box. Charger, case, USB-C cable, and a pair of earphones. Number 10. This phone is fast. Snapdragon 888, 12 gigs of LPDDR5 RAM, 256 gigs of UFS 3.1 storage by default. And if you're someone who keeps an eye on benchmarks, this is right next to the ROG Phone 5 as the highest score I've ever recorded. But every flagship phone in 2021 is fast. What makes this interesting is that it's got that ultra performance. It's got the ultra camera, but it's not exactly ultra in dimensions. Most companies with their maxed out models, they go for somewhere between 6.7 and 6.9 inches in terms of screen. This is 6.56, which makes it sit somewhere between the base Galaxy S21 and the Galaxy S21 Plus in terms of footprint. The camera module does protrude on the back, but it's a really grippable size. Number 9. Every phone has customization, but I don't think I've ever seen this extent of control over core system animations. I think it will surprise you. So for starters, you've got an ambient light around the edges of the screen, and this can be configured into all sorts of shapes and sizes depending on whether you're receiving a call, listening to music, getting a notification, etc. You've got 6 different icons for your in-display fingerprint scanner, but get this, those can be mixed and matched with 8 different animations for the scanner, and then 6 more animations for the facial recognition. So without even touching wallpaper, you have like 300 different visual combinations for your lock screen. Oh yeah, and you can change the charging animation, the USB insertion animation, scanner. But get this, those can be mixed and matched with 8 different animations for the scanner, and then 6 more animations for the facial recognition. So without even touching the wallpaper, you have like 300 different visual combinations for your lock screen. Oh yeah, and you can change the charging animation, the USB insertion animation, and even in what way the screen will turn off when you hit the standby button. These are such easy features to implement. I don't know why more companies don't do them. Anyways, as you can probably tell by the dimensions of the thing, cameras are a very important part of this phone's DNA. And so, before we get into the meat of it, Before we get into the meat of it,
Со мной происходит что-то странное. Каждый раз, когда я спускаюсь по лестнице, я начинаю танцевать, причем в замедлении. Неужели все дело в том, что я герой?
Number 8 is the zoom. Now, I'm not really a huge zoom person, but it's surprisingly good, given that it's not meant to be one of the phone's selling points. Like up until you get to 10 times zoom, so 2 times, 3 times, 5 times, 8 times, it is at least as good as the Galaxy S21 Ultra. And then after 10 times it falls behind, but not really by as much as you might think. But then we get to the main camera. Long story short, it's an enormous sensor, like bigger than that of a Galaxy S21 Ultra, paired with the widest aperture that I've seen on a phone in the last 2 years, at f1.57. And there's a very distinct result you get from credentials like this. The Vivo X60 Pro Plus is a bokeh machine. Or in other words, photos have A, incredibly crisp foregrounds, and B, incredibly blurred backgrounds. For as long as I can remember, this is the closest a phone has gotten to taking photos that look DSLR-like. Except, unlike DSLRs, this has possibly the most aggressive HDR algorithm I've ever seen. If you're into that. They're basically just incredibly blurred backgrounds. For as long as I can remember, this is the closest a phone has gotten to taking photos that look DSLR-like. Except, unlike DSLRs, this has possibly the most aggressive HDR algorithm I've ever seen. If you're into that. It basically just means you're quite unlikely to end up with overexposed skies, even if it can feel a little inorganic. So, lots of natural bokeh means that you should need to use portrait mode less. But number 6 is that if you do decide to use portrait mode, it's quite a lot of fun here. You get a bunch of different portrait modes. There's one called French Impressions that, I'm going to be honest, confuses me. But the majority do distinctly change the end image in a good way. It's even got night mode portraits, which uses the flash while capturing to keep faces bright. I'm going to be honest, confuses me. But the majority do distinctly change the end image in a good way. It's even got night mode portraits, which uses the flash while capturing to keep faces bright. But the signature one here is called Biotar. So, it's probably not a surprise to you that this phone is a partnership with Zeiss. You literally can't miss it. And Biotog is basically a lens design that Zeiss came up with. We're talking years ago, like 1920s. It then became a bit of a collector's item because it whips it. What surprised you that this phone is a partnership with Zeiss? You literally can't miss it. And Biotog is basically a lens design that Zeiss came up with. We're talking years ago, like 1920s. It then became a bit of a collector's item because of the unique look it could create. They call it rotational bokeh. And so the idea of this portrait mode is that it recreates that lens. Plus, you can also refocus shots after you've taken them, which is always fun. But there's another feature linked to this whole Zeiss thing. Probably subtler, but I think the concept of it is cooler. Like, we all know at this point that just having a camera company's name slapped onto a phone doesn't make it good. But with this phone, Zeiss has used their own signature T-star glass on the lenses. And just having a camera company's name slapped onto a phone doesn't make it good. But with this phone, Zeiss has used their own signature T-star glass on the lenses. And that apparently eliminates internal reflections. The way they brand it is as making the glass completely invisible, and therefore apparently creating cleaner images. It's a pretty hard one for me to test though. I can't exactly scratch it off and then do a before and after, but you can kind of see it in action if you point this phone at a bright light source. You can tell that the lens isn't fighting as much with the light by how there's much less glow, or ghosting from it. And number 4, much with the light, in action if you point this phone at a bright light source. You can tell that the lens isn't fighting as much with the light by how there's much less glow, or ghosting from it. And number 4, the icing on the cake, I'm so sorry, is motion autofocus. So, it turns out this phone has a full menu all about making sure it keeps focus on things. So it can do eye autofocus, body autofocus, and even object autofocus. And with each one, it's just locking on a different thing and keeping focus on it wherever that thing goes. These are features that I've just got on my actual main Sony a7S III camera. But now we're into the top 3. First up is gimbal stabilization. So, you might remember last year's X50 Pro. This was basically the gimbal phone, because it was the first to have a camera that could not just physically move, but also rotate to counteract your hand movements. And in some situations you could really tell, but equally in a lot of them its footage didn't look distinctly different to, say, a Samsung, which already has good stabilization. This is different. They've not just improved the stabilization system by giving the camera an extra dimension in which it can compensate your movements with. They've also moved it from the main camera to the ultra-wide camera, which, because it's more zoomed out, is naturally less prone to shaking anyways. And the implication of this is that in just about every single scenario, you can tell. I did do a couple of tests. This is a cinematic shot taken on both. And while they do both look good, you can feel the effect of the gimbal. This is me running. The Vivo is much more focused on the subject, although I could see some people preferring a more natural motion. And this is what happens when you move to lower light. This is like a best case scenario for the Vivo, where the electronic image stabilization on most phones just kind of falls apart. Number 2, you're either going to find this really surprising, or it's exactly what you expected. So, I mentioned earlier that this is a massive camera sensor paired with, I've literally got camera everywhere, paired with a wide aperture. Well, alongside bokeh, this kind of setup is also conducive to really bright night photos. Actually, probably the brightest nighttime photos I've ever seen on a phone, or any camera for that matter. To some extent, it is stylistic. Like, I don't think the best night mode shots are necessarily the brightest, but this has the detail too. The first couple of times I took one, I had to genuinely take a moment, like, what? And there's a bit more to it. It's got different styles of night mode, and while some of them are just kind of flat filters, there are a few that make quite dramatic changes to the color profile. And I did eventually find a night where a few stars popped out. I'm talking Britain here, so I do literally mean a few stars. You can see the behind-the-scenes shot here, but it was enough to give me a chance to try the Astro mode. It's good. It's really quite good. Like, this is not a 100% like-for-like comparison, but for context, this is a tripod-enhanced night mode on the S21 Ultra, and this is the Astro mode on the X60. It's the most stars that I've ever seen from my back garden. So, while I was at it, I took another one, and yeah, you get the idea. But here's the other thing.
Петрович.
Because the ultra-wide camera is now the one to have the gimbal stabilization system on it, it can hold itself still for like 10 seconds at a time, meaning that this is also the brightest ultra-wide night mode I've seen. And speaking of things that are bright, if you are enjoying this video, then a sub to the channel would be illuminating. Anyways, number one, I did tell you that this phone is half camera. It's an extension of this night mode panoramas. Pretty self-explanatory. It combines night mode with the ability to pan around and capture an entire cityscape. Admittedly, this is Nottingham, UK we're talking about, so it's no Hong Kong, but it looks crispy. And there you have it, X60 Pro Plus. Thanks for watching. My name is Aaron. This is Mr. Who's the Boss, and I'll catch you in the next one.
Сотрудники для малого бизнеса на ХХРУ. Это ваш магазин одежды с модными в этом сезоне моделями и с яркими принтами. Но он закрыт, потому что вы все еще ищете продавца, на которого можно положиться. Разместите вакансию на ХХРУ. Общайтесь с кандидатами и найдите продавца, который подходит именно вашему бизнесу. Здесь найдутся те, кто вам нужен.
Незабудный на Яндекс.Маркете. Большая распродажа товаров для ваших впечатлений. Только до 26 сентября. Скачайте приложение.
So, this is the new OnePlus 9, and this is the new OnePlus 9 Pro. And they might just be the best value phones in 2021. Let's get into it. 10 out of 10 presentation box, I gotta say. This thing was so heavy that I would have really been half surprised if it was just filled with rocks. But no, as soon as you open it, this enormous Spaceman poster reveals itself. This will make more sense later. And then we have the OnePlus 9 and the OnePlus 9 Pro. There's also a drawer underneath, which just shows a couple of good cases you can get. The first being carbon fiber, which, to be honest, I think really works in terms of texture. But then there's also a classic OnePlus sandstone one, which, by comparison,
Если денег не дают, делать что
plus a 50-watt wireless charger. Yeah, it's a chunky bit of kit, but at the same time, not many phones can wirelessly charge at 50 watts, so it's impressive. But all that stuff's just a bit of fun. The only thing that really matters here is the retail boxes, what you get if you buy one of these. So, this is the OnePlus 9. You get a little manual up top, there's the phone, and then apart from earphones, which OnePlus has never given, it's the full package. You get a clear case with a bit of texture, a red USB-C cable, and a 65-watt charger. And then we've got the Pro, which is a very similar package, so we won't do the whole thing again. But the one difference is that instead of clear, with the Pro, you get a matte opaque case. And thanks to Surfshark VPN for sponsoring this video. Okay, here's the thing with OnePlus. For the last 5 years, they've just been extremely easy phones for me to recommend. They're cheaper than the competition, they've still had top-end specs, and they run on software that's both slick and intuitive for non-techies, but also with enough depth for people who are looking for it. And that mentality hasn't changed this time around. Like, bearing in mind that the OnePlus 9 starts at £629 in the UK, which makes it about 20% cheaper than Samsung's base S21, getting a lot of stuff here. Like, both the 9 and the 9 Pro have a Snapdragon 888 chipset, with performance that actually comes out slightly higher than that of a Galaxy S21 Ultra in an isolated test. But, like that phone, does also fall with persistent usage. They both got 120Hz fluid AMOLED displays, dual stereo speakers, which I feel like an A- to. They're not the best, but they're also definitely not the worst. 4,500 mAh batteries, wireless charging plus wireless reverse charging, and Warp Charge 65T, which is 65-watt charging, but optimized to be able to fully charge from 1 to 100 in 29 minutes. I was a bit confused though, why they were giving me a 1 to 100 figure. So I tested it myself, and if you're charging from 0 to 100, which is probably the more likely scenario, it's more like 33 minutes. Still, very rapid though. And then we've got the 9 Pro, which for $829 has a few things that separate it from the normal 9.
И не надо.
Я уже устал звать вас на вебинар. Неужели...
Новый формат онлайн-образования. Учись сейчас, оплати после трудоустройства. Synergy Academy. Получи
Торговец Скидан предложил мне очень опасное дело. На АТП поселился контролер, который представляет угрозу для местных сталкеров. Надо с ним разобраться, что я и сделал, попутно получив достижения. Однако это еще не все. На кордоне множество незаконченных дел, которыми я займусь в этой серии. Буду вам признателен, если обеспечите ролику мощный старт своими лайками и комментариями. Приятного просмотра. Так, кукла сказала, что она что-то видит, поэтому нам нужно активировать куклу на F10. И спросить, что ты видишь. В одном из помещений спрятан ящик с хабаром. Проверь гараж. Спасибо за информацию. Не забываем, что еще тут был Сноуден, плюс там какой-то сталкер непонятно валялся с головой тушкана. Приду в лагерь, спрошу, может, кому надо. И вот этот вот братишка, что он из себя представляет? Это некто механик. У него мы находим 10 пороха и спички. Отмычка новичок. Кстати говоря, вроде как я могу себе крафтить заряды, усиленные для самопала. Только я не совсем понимаю как. Давай предварительно сохранимся. Использовать и что? Нужны подшипники. Ага, все понял. Надо подшипники купить. И в то же время я перегружен. 83 килограмма. Подожди, у меня опять ватник не был одет. А, я второй ватник нашел. У меня теперь два новых ватника, что ли, получается? Немного не понял. 83 килограмма. Может, колеса пока выкинем? Но по идее, они никуда не должны деться отсюда, правильно? Правильно. Так что по этому поводу не переживаем. Разбиваем ящики под лестницей. Водка. Ого, 2 бутылки. Водки у меня уже 10 бутылок. Куда столько? И, значит, говорит, проверь гараж. Ну, давай проверим, что тут, где тут. Вот ящик, например, какой-то вижу. Обыскивается? Нет, не обыскивается. Вот ящики. Может, их разбить надо? Ага, смотри, тут кое-что есть. Это что? Походный ремкомплект. Это имелось в виду? Да кто знает, вряд ли. У меня один уже такой есть. Для чистки и ремонта амуниции в походных условиях. К сожалению, содержимое набора произведено кустарным способом, кем-то из народных умельцев. И не выдерживает интенсивного использования. Понятно. Ага, видели? Я думаю, видели. Ну все, я уставший максимально. 74 из 70. Надо донести и что-то сложить. Уже и прыгнуть нельзя. Давай энергетик выпьем. Он просто полностью восстанавливает мне энергию. Итак, в ящике получен элитный детектор. Это что, вот так вот просто? Элитный детектор? Его, кстати, на поезд же можно поставить. Этот элитный детектор. Подожди, нет, это универсальный. А я кто-то добрал. А я подобрал вроде элитный. Что-то я туплю, я не вижу его у себя в инвентаре. Ну смотри, все-таки это универсальный. Видишь, у меня его сейчас нет. Подбираю. И вот он появляется. Там написано элитный, тут написано универсальный. Это ввело меня в ступор. Ну хорошо, пусть будет. Колеса я пока выкинул, за ними позже вернемся. И, в принципе, больше меня тут ничего не держит. Вообще, надо сходить. Я сейчас, наверное, не буду ходить по заданиям. Схожу в лагерь и скину барахло. Слишком уж много у меня всякого. О, а это там стоит до сих пор смотрит. Вообще не понял этого звука. Все, останься. Вы что, не будете теперь приставать тут? Что происходит, не пойму. Тут, оказывается, кошки выносливости отнимают, что ли? Ладно, завалил я паразита. Вот это ты крут. Просто не верится. Скидан тебя теперь до небес превозносить будет. Надеюсь, больше ничего подобного ему в голову не взбредет. Пошли домой, тебе надо отдохнуть. До встречи. Ну пошли, мне действительно надо домой. Вот он ящик, убираем сюда все. Мне не нужно. Патроны тоже пока сюда уберем. Зачем я их ношу, если мне нечем стрелять, правильно? Мини-ремкомплект для брони. Нет комплект. Аптечки оставим. Боек пока, наверное. А че он так мало дает? Коэффициент голода 0,2. Но его, наверное, много раз можно использовать. 27 килограмм по итогу. Плюс еще кастрюльку чайник можно убрать. Вообще шикарно. И с этим я должен идти к Скидану. Угадай, кого я недавно видел на АТП. Кого же? Дохлого контролера, у которого из спины торчал один из своих бывших ножей. Слушай, ну ты, просто слов нет. Как нам всем помог? Огромное тебе спасибо, Скидан. Скажи мне одно. На кой ляд тебе вдруг сдался этот несчастный контролер? Ну сидел он у себя на АТП. Никого не трогал. Он там, вы здесь. Никто никому особо и не мешал. Что там на этом АТП вообще полезного? А интересное там же там. Кое-что да и есть. Что же, потом расскажу. А пока что получи-ка награду. Удружил. Антирад, аптечка, детектор аномалий и кожаная куртка. Выполнено. Все, больше с ним ни о чем в этом поговорить нельзя. И он мне дал детектор аномалий, но у меня есть элитный, который прям на миникарте показывает аномалии, а этот, получается, звуковым сигналом. Продавать я пока не буду. А по поводу брони какая лучше? Ой, ну ватник хотя бы от радиации защищает. Плюс опять-таки удар, разрыв. А чем лучше этот бронь? А ответ такой, ничем. Кожаная бронька не лучше. Опять-таки я пока не буду продавать. Щебень пусть забирает. Плюс 9000 нам, я думаю, будет не лишним. Давай возьмем немного подшипников, а вот на все 4 штуки. И попробуем себе закрафтить улучшенные снаряды для самопала, потому что теми стрелять невозможно обычно. Так, кстати, пока ни о чем надо искать. Я тут голову тушкана нашел. Жирный был. Наверное. Дай-ка позырить. Ух ты, вот это клыки. Отдай мне эту морду, а? Я давно мечтал чем-то дома похвастаться. Если вернусь, конечно. Сколько дашь за нее? С деньгами напряг, в долгах я. Давай меняться. Ты мне эту морду, а я тебе кожаные перси. Новенькие. Муха не сидела. По рукам. Ботинки разведчика. Грамотно усовершенствованные армейские ботинки. Какой-то разведчик неплохо укрепил обувь и покрыл ее защитным составом. Даже защиту ног независимо от надетого костюма. Повесить на пояс. Вот как. То есть защиты ног тут нет, а теперь тут присутствует. Наверное, это работает так, что если я попадаю в аномалию, то меня защищает. А, ну кстати, тут защиты различаются. Типа у костюма есть защита живота, тогда как у ватника ее нет. Но все равно ладно, пока уберем. Итак, берем порох, использовать обычные. Усиленные, конечно. Еще раз, усиленные, усиленные и усиленные. 32 усиленных, обычные убираем, потому что не надо. Заряжаем усиленными. Дальше что? А дальше по куче квестов надо бежать. Не понял, а почему скидом-то висит? Наверное, по поводу исполнителя. О, это тоже пришел. Живой, здоровый, все с ним прекрасно. Тут тоже все нормально. Ого, суп. Не понял, это ты мой суп мне продаешь, который я тебе изготовил? Пойдем наберем воды. Что-то кто-то мне там толдычит про тайник на крыше еще одного из домов. Якобы залезь, посмотри. Честно говоря, нет у меня особого желания, да и, по-моему, я не допрыгну отсюда никак. Ну да, видишь, не знаю, кем надо быть, чтобы туда допрыгнуть. Если, конечно, тайник это тут. Но не допрыгиваю. Там я был, на эту крышу, туда внутрь вроде как не залезть. На этой крыше был, там не был, туда тоже не допрыгнуть. Тут был. Ладно, предлагаю пойти за артефактом, который тут появился, потому что мне надо. Доставим детектор. Ну и что, давай. Вот не аномальной зоны. Понял. Да, ближе подойдем. Все, забрал. Снова щебень. Ну понятно, здесь такие не самые лучшие арты попадаются. Ну щебень и щебень продадим потом тоже впоследствии. Итак, наконец-то идем к рации. И вообще вот к этой куче квестов, которые в этой части локации. А еще надо понять, где же тайп.
Нет. Вот это еще. А, вот это и он имеет в виду, что
Тайник, на котором меня взять маска. Так, я на месте. Рация. Нет питания. Кукла в рюкзаке. А чего кукла-то? Давай достанем. Слушайте эфир. F. И что мы должны делать? Ты прослушал эфир? Да, там кто-то просит о помощи. Это военные. Расскажу тебе все по порядку. Сгоревший БТР у остановки на кордоне. Это спасательная экспедиция службы безопасности Украины. Военные были отправлены на поиски Максима Камерера. У них имелась карта с координатами входа в секретную лабораторию, где работал Макс. Похоже, что карта сгорела вместе с военными. Нет, она не могла сгореть, так как это была секретная карта, выполненная в двух вариантах. Электронном и бумажном. Бумага, естественно, сгорела. А вот электронный планшет с картой нет, потому что он был защищен прочным корпусом. Поищи его рядом с БТРом. Там его нет. Вот это очень плохо. Скорее всего, его стащил кто-то из местных. Теперь твоя задача поговорить со всеми, кого знаешь на кордоне, и выяснить судьбу планшета с картой. Найдем планшет, получим доступ к лаборатории. Голоса в эфире, просящие о помощи, как раз и принадлежат тем, кто остался в подземелье. Как видишь, они еще живы. Я поговорю с местными. Понятно. Дальше. Останки туриста. Это квест по поводу ауга. Те кошки первые будут меня отнимать. Можно как-то замочить сразу? Не сложно, кстати. Одна уже, видимо, не будет мешаться. Ну что, молодец, тут надо как-то пройти. Я думаю, проскочить, пропрыгнуть самым лучшим вариантом будет. Вот тут как будто проход имеется, кстати. Надо попробовать пройти.
Блин, хорошо быть? Нет.
Ага, неплохо. Тут есть скелет. Осмотреть останки. Керамический контейнер получен. Не все то золото. Название квеста, что как бы намекает. Отлично, с этим контейнером я должен возвращаться тут скидану. Но давай также осмотрим хабар Сноудена. Там вполне может быть что-то вкусное. Вижу кое-что интересное. Что ты видишь? Спросим. Рядом есть автобусная остановка. На крыше лежит ящик сюрпризов. Спасибо за информацию. Вы, конечно, не поверите, но я так и подумал. Из-за того, что тут стоят ящики, как-то странно. Как будто по ним надо запрыгнуть. А, так может быть это и есть хабар Сноудена?
Наоборот, как надо. Марафон. Дети, марафон. Наоборот, значит, да. А, ты так думаешь? Серьезно? Ни хрена себе. Эй, не стесняйся. Не стесняйся, наоборот. Нормально.
Наверху. Скорее всего, да. Хотя нет, хабар Сноудена. Ну что такое? Что вы пристали? Покоя от вас нет. Да, попробуем запрыгнуть. Ага, то есть эта гора сломается. Давай, 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 давай. Давай! Отлично, вообще красиво. Ящик, в ящике. Артефакт хрусталь получен. Это был тот самый хабар Сноудена? Да нет, он как-то в этой стороне отмечен. На дереве, наверное, каком-нибудь. Не, ну неплохо запрыгнуть, кстати. Надеюсь, что тут точно больше ничего нет, потому что второй раз мне вряд ли получится залезть. Что за хрусталь? Хрусталь. Один здоровье, все остальное плохое. При расщеплении позволяет выведать ценную информацию у многих персонажей. Чего? Сейчас вообще не понял. По поводу барахла Сноудена. Вообще какая-то инфа, может, куда появилась? Найденная информация. Нет, по поводу Сноудена тут ничего. Данные. Но это мои данные. А, вот его рюкзак в кустах тут лежит, забрать содержимое. Забрать ворох 8, подшипники 4, спички и булыжник. Да чё-то как-то ничего серьезного, честно говоря. Булыжник вот. Один я убрал, другой вот. Кто? Ты что-то крякаешь, бегаешь. Кстати, там какой-то труп валяется. Если посмотреть, то это какой-то сталкер. А, и на его там, скорее всего, это просто от разработчика такой намек. Что, мол, вот, не ходи. В смысле, а что? Так, ну теперь обелиски смотреть. Где-то что-то тут, да? Опа, ну вот отметка как бы на земле стоит, то есть выше подниматься никуда не надо, но тут ничего нет. Сейчас разберемся. Может быть, надо наверх залезть? Вполне может быть. Это тут горит костер. А, и ящик есть. В ящике мы находим лопату, записку. Дым.
Ну,
Оставляй
чё,
инструмент здесь. В деревне тащить его не
ладно,
хочу.
нет, это всего лишь как бы. Ну, понятно. Понимаешь, мы не умеем людей рожать. Понимаешь, если как мужик ты не можешь, да. Ну да, да. Что умеешь рожать? Ты их воспитывать, ты умеешь их воспитывать. Ну, влияние. Неужели это? хотел просять, говорил, да. Недостаточно играть свою музыку, надо еще уметь играть. Деньги. Секрет, секрет. Просто играть не умеешь, и все. Ой. Да, как вы поняли, я не собираюсь не уметь играть. Я собираюсь уметь играть. Может даже так называется. Что, соло тогда потом?
Quasi.